In this demonstration, we're going to be looking at using the n8n node tool, which is a CLI with some node utilities, to create a custom node. Our custom node will be an XSLT processor, which will take a XML string as input and an XSLT template style sheet as another input, and it will transform the XML to our output, and we will be using, as mentioned, the n8n node tool. So the first thing that you'll need to do, if you have not already done so, is to do an npm install global n8n node CLI. Also, just quickly, we're going to be looking at our actual processor, which is going to be a TypeScript XSLT processor from GitHub that we pulled from the user design Liquido. And we're going to import, and we're going to use that to actually do our transformation. So we're going to create an empty project, basically an empty folder, and we're going to go ahead and open that in Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to open our folder, and we are going to go to our demo and our XSLT node, select our folder. So we have an empty folder here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up a bash terminal. We're going to issue the command. As you see, the package name must start with n8n nodes. If this is not done, the node will not be able to determine that this is actually supposed to be a custom node package. So we're going to call this n8n nodes XSLT. You're presented with a type of node you're building. They have HTTP API, which is the standard GET POST calls. We're going to be using other. So it's going to initialize a Git repository for you. It does not create a git ignore file for you. But if you're using plugins, you'll be reminded to do that. Or you can have something like Claude generate a git ignore, or you can pull a git ignore file off of GitHub for Node.js application. Here we go. So our warning has too many changes. Only a subset of Git features will be enabled. Would you like to add node modules to git ignore? Yes, we want to do that. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay. So it's finished scaffolding our project for us, and it gives us the next step, which is to cd to a n8n nodes XSLT. This is actually the root of the source for our node. There's some things of interest in here. You'll see that it's created a package JSON, which gives the information about the names, the GitHub repository, as well as some scripts that we can use with the npm command line. So we have a build watch, dev, lint, lint fix, release. It's got our startup file and an n8n property, and our dev dependencies. You can see that that is ESLint, typical things you'd find in a node project. Node CLI to pure dependencies is n8n workflow, which is the framework that we're going to be working on. So the important files here. So as far as your custom node is concerned, that is going to be scaffolded into a nodes directory. You'll see that we have the SVG graphic, which is going to be used. This is the default graphic supplied. We have a JSON file, which lists some of the properties, the name, the version, etc. Example node is actually where the TypeScript code resides for the execution of the custom node. So if we look at this, we see that it has scaffolded us a class that implements the INode interface, which has some required properties, descriptions, icons, inputs, And then you can see that there's some node properties here. Now these actually correlate with the inputs that you are going to see that you can set or assign as inputs from the outputs of the last connected node, or you can hard code them. We'll see that in just a minute. So this is the actual function that's going to execute the code. You'll see that this is a promise. Another important thing here is because n8n works by processing items individually. So if you think of an array, it'll run code for each item in the array. We see the loop for that actually here. So it's looking for an item index, and for each item index, it's going to execute the code that we see in this try-catch loop. So let's go ahead and run this. I've copied cd to my directory, and I'm going npm run dev. So what this is going to do is it's going to start up an n8n instance. If you don't have one already, it will install it and it'll run npx n8n, so you'll actually have a sandbox version of n8n running. Okay, so we see localhost 5678. That is our URL, or you can just hit O to open. I'm going to go ahead and open it in my browser here. If you're starting new, you're going to have to create an admin account with the username and password. I've already had an n8n instance running, so it is using that particular directory that it created the first time to find the workflows that I have. So the same SQL-like database. That way, after you create your sandbox node instance, you don't lose changes. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new workflow. I'm going to go ahead and add a manual trigger to this. And we are going to add the next node. And since our node is called example, we're going to add that. If you see this my string here, we can see that it correlates with the properties in our INode type declaration. So these properties are what you are going to find as the input parameters. So we can put something in here like hello world. Execute this. Very simple output. We see that my string is now equal to hello world. We are running with watch, so there is hot load capability. So if I wanted to go ahead, let's say, and change this, I'm going to go ahead and modify whatever is in the input. I'm just going to add a string. How are you? So this is our custom code to begin with. Once we save that, see the hot load was triggered. If I execute this workflow again, you'll see the changes. Okay, if we look at what our n8n nodes CLI scaffold is for us, we will see that we have a .vs code folder with a launch JSON in it. So in order to debug that, Visual Studio is going to use this launch JSON file, and you can see that we have a debug configuration that was added for us. I did not have typed this. This is attached to running n8n. It's going to pick a process, or allow you to pick a process, and the type is a node debugger. Now, one of the things is that we created this in a parent folder, XSLT node, which was kind of one level above the scaffolding code. So in order for Visual Studio to know that this is the launch configuration, the easiest way to do that is to go ahead and open our folder at the actual scaffolding code root. Okay, I'm going to get rid of some of these old breakpoints here. I'm going to put one on the execute method right here. We're going to go ahead and open our git bash terminal. And we're going to run. Now, if you haven't shut down your previous instance that you were running, you'll want to go ahead and do that. So we're starting up a new instance. Now, once this is running, what we want to do is go ahead, click on Run, Start Debugging. You're going to see a lot of processes, or you may see a lot of processes, depending on what you have running. We want to attach to the actual n8n process. So if we scroll over these, we should see it's the second one down that we have our bin n8n process. This is what we're going to want to attach to. So you should see this over here turn red. That means that our debugger is armed, and we are going to take a look at our workflow again. We'll execute this. We should hit our breakpoint. In fact, we do. So you have all the typical debug symbols and environments that you'd be working with as far as this project is concerned. So you can debug as you would typically debug a TypeScript project. So we'll just step through. You get the point. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to detach from that. So now we're actually going to implement our XSLT processor. So I'm going to go ahead and use an NPM library from Design Liquido. It's just called XSLT Processor. And simple instructions on this for our purposes is that we are importing the library, we are creating the instances of the classes that will do our parsing, and we are assigning our out string to an XML parser, which takes the XML string, and then the XSLT string assigns it to the output string. So the logic here is pretty simple. One thing that you will want to note, okay, is that if you're going to install a third-party library, for instance, with npm install, which we are going to do, then the node cannot be used for the n8n cloud, okay? And that's for obvious reasons, because it's running in a cloud environment and allowing community nodes to import all these different TypeScript libraries. It's hard to maintain. It's also not secure. So in our world, we are self-hosted. So we are going to look at it as this is a self-hosted node. We can do all the customization that we need to. We can add nodes that we want to. We can install npm library or npm packages. We can basically do whatever we want. We can uninstall them, get rid of them. So we're going to handle all that. But just keep that in mind. You can create a community node, but you should be using standard TypeScript for that if you're going to do that and not rely on third-party libraries. So we're going to go ahead and stop our instance that is running because we're going to install a new package. So we're going to say npm install XSLT Processor. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, now that we have that installed, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the example again so we can get our import statement. We're going to paste that here. Okay. So you're going to see one of the issues that we get here for our linting errors, and you're going to see the import XSLT processor is not allowed. n8n cloud does not allow community nodes with dependencies. Okay, that was what I was just mentioning. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to disable that for our file to get rid of our squigglies. Once that goes away, we get another error. XML parser is defined but never used. That's what we're expecting. So we'll go ahead and we will start implementing this. So the first thing, we see that we're going to need a parser, XSLT object and an XSLT parser. So we're going to copy that. We're going to declare that above our for statement. These are also going to be unused declaration linting errors. We will fix that. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to add or change our properties. So the first one here we're going to change, and we'll call this XML input. And the variable name, placeholder value, then we have a description. Okay, so we're going to need XML string as input, and we're also going to need the transformation style sheet, the XSLT. So we're going to create another property. We're going to copy what is already here. We're going to call this XSLT input. So that is also a string. We now have two properties. You can see that when it's running through this, it's using the helper method to get the node parameter. So we are going to change my string to, and we're going to add another variable. We're going to assign that. We're going to use the name of that parameter, which we've declared up here. And we are going to use XSLT input. We're going to do the same thing here. Okay, let's go ahead and test our node. I want to make sure that we have our n8n server running, which it is. We will go to our example, and we are going to need the XML input and the style sheet. So I have that in Notepad. This is an XML document. We have page, message, hello world. So we're going to paste that as our input. We need our style sheet. Here's our style sheet. We're matching the root. It's looking for page message. It's transforming it to HTML here with giving it a color green and selecting the value. So this is our style sheet. Go ahead and paste that and execute it. As you can see, we now have an HTML element that was derived from our input. Okay, one of the things that we want to do to finish this up is to rename our example to XSLT Processor. So if we look at our workflow, I'm going to go ahead and delete this node so that we don't have any references to invalid objects after we change the name. I'm going to go ahead and stop the n8n server. Go ahead first, and we're going to rename this directory to XSLT Processor, and we're going to rename all the files. Whoop, I'm in the dist directory. Don't want to be there. In fact, I'm going to get rid of this because we're going to be rebuilding it. So I want to rename under our nodes directory XSLT Processor. So it's going to have to be selected the wrong. Need the subdirectory XSLT Processor. We're going to rename these. Okay, we're also going to have to update the n8n section to reflect the correct directory now and the correct file name. So we have that. A processor node, we are going to want to change our class name here to XSLT Processor. We are going to change the display name, the name, alrighty, we're going to run npm run build to see if we have any lingering issues. One other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the example SVG. We're going to need one for light and we're going to need one for dark. So what I'm going to do is find an SVG image, and in fact I found one right here conveniently. So I'm going to save the image as icon SVG in our nodes folder where we have the other SVG images. So we're going to name this icon SVG. We're going to want to create one for icon dark SVG because they have to be different. Alrighty, and we have to change that in our node where we have in our description, we have the icon here, so we are going to call this icon SVG and icon dark SVG to match our file names that we've saved in our directory. And we're going to go ahead and run this. Okay, so we're going to add our XSLT node. It is no longer called example, so we will search for XSLT. We have our XSLT processor here. I'm going to go ahead and save that. We can see that we have our icon. And we'll go ahead and run this one more time with the same data and style sheet that we were using before, just to make sure everything still works. And there we go. Once we're satisfied with the node that we developed, we may be looking at, well, how do we deploy this to our current instance? Because remember, when we are running npm run dev, we are getting a local npx instance of n8n. So suppose we had an n8n instance working within a Docker container. So if we take a look at this, we shall see that we're now on another instance. Before you do this, by the way, make sure that you've shut down the npm run dev in the terminal, because the port will already be occupied and your Docker instance won't start. So this is just really a matter of the file directories and how they're placed and how n8n reads them. So if we were going to go ahead and deploy this, we would want to first cd from the root that we have running, which is, I believe, home n8n, the default. Okay. You can see that there's a directory here called custom that does not exist until you make that. So I made a directory custom, and there was nothing that I had to do with the permissions on that. I'm also running a Docker volume so that anything I do to the image will persist. And we can see, in fact, that custom directory right here. So in order to deploy this node so that we can use it on our n8 instance, we want the disk directory underneath that nodes. We're going to import that entire directory into the custom directory that we created. So in order to do that, we're going to go to our container. We're going to go to the files. Okay, so then we're going to navigate to our home directory, our node directory. It's going to take a minute. And then our n8n directory. Here you'll see we have our custom directory. So I'm going to go ahead and import. And we want to go to our disk directory. And nodes, we're going to select this folder. So now we should see custom nodes XSLT Processor. So we're going to go ahead and restart our Docker instance, our Docker n8n instance. Give that a minute to warm up. Okay, so we're going to create a workflow like the last one. We're going to add a manual trigger, and we should see XSLT Processor here. We'll use the same XML and style sheet. We'll go ahead and execute that. And we see that we have our transformed document in the form of HTML. So that pretty much wraps up the demonstration of how to create custom nodes. The important takeaways from this is the CLI is very useful. So you start a new project and you use the n8n node space new to create it. Remember your naming conventions. When the template's scaffolded, you're going to be interested in your execute method as well as some of the properties and inputs in here. This is where a lot of the code goes. If you look at some of the samples, like for instance, they have a GitHub issues sample. It's a little bit more involved. It's structured more like a TypeScript application where you have separation of files and classes and things like that. But for the bare bones processing, this will give you a good idea of how this works, where to put the code, and also how to deploy your code on your self-hosted n8n instance so that you can use it in your workflows. I hope you've enjoyed this demo. I hope it gives you a lot of ideas for creating your own custom nodes and that you will find that very useful. Thank you.